Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have my book review of the book Star Wars Fate of the Jedi Conviction by Aaron Allston. We are nearing the end of the Fate of the Jedi series. In my review here, I have reviewed every book in this series to just real quickly go through them. I enjoyed Outcast. It was an entertaining book. Omen had some really cool parts, but there were parts I didn't enjoy. Abyss was a significant step up, but not quite the best book in the series yet. However, the next three books are where the series starts to hit its stride. Backlash was great, Allies was great, and Vortex was great. And so this series has had some good parts and some great parts. And so I was really excited going into Conviction because I felt like things are starting to really happen again. And they kind of do. But there's also things that frustrate me in this book. So because we're so deep into the series at this point, I need to be able to talk a little bit about spoilers. That's because, the series concept has kind of expanded and we're deep into it. So to talk about anything in the book kind of spoils the previous books and also might spoil this one. So because of that, if you haven't read any of the series, and particularly if you haven't read this book, I would advise you to click away after I tell you my overall thoughts, because I will be getting into spoilers on this. Suffice it to say that this is an entertaining read, although it is not a top book in the series. It's kind of towards the bottom for me, unfortunately. So, with that being said, going into the spoilers, this book we finally see the Jedi take action against Dala. Dala has been so frustrating. We see them finally go and take over the Senate, take out Dala, and basically say, all right, Senate, you do your thing. We're establishing a triumvirate where there's a Jedi, where there's a senator, and there's a general. And the three of them will kind of manage things until a permanent chief of state is decided. And they decide, they're like, well, Leia has experience as chief of state. Let's just make her chief of state. And they're like, no, because she's too close to the Jedi. And they're like, well, give it to this other person. No, they're too close to the others. So they have to choose someone who will kind of placate all the factions. And we know how that worked for Rome, how having a triumvirate worked for Rome. We also know what having a triumvirate worked for with the Thrawn in the Hand of Thrawn duology, when they tried to use three guys to make one Thrawn. That didn't work out so well. Anyway, I just thought that was funny. So we see them finally take over the Senate. And one thing I really liked about this idea was, what if Revenge of the Sith Palpatine was right? What if the Jedi do have to take over? What if they do have to do a coup? What if they have to do all these things to establish order? But they're not doing it for ulterior reasons. It's not like the Jedi are turning evil with this. It's that they're realizing that that they need to stop Dala, and this is the only way. And I did enjoy that element because it's exploring those themes that you see in Revenge of the Sith. I also really liked the idea of the triumvirate and exploring the way that political power would work and how the Senate would react. The way the Jedi took Dala was actually kind of boring to me. Like the actual action scene of them breaking in and taking Dala. There were some funny moments because Aaron Allston is a funny writer. He likes to have, despite how dark the cover is, he likes to have a lot of humor in his books. And so there's quite a lot of humor in the battle sequence. But I think it could have been more epic. I think it could have had more high stakesness to it. I think another author might have made it more dramatic, and that's what I think the story needed. Instead, it was more silly. But I enjoyed that part, and in Tahiri, I just was shocked that the Vortex ends with Tahiri basically kind of getting a guilty verdict. And then you have Conviction begin, and she's still in the legal process. And I was like, really? And so finally, she gets convicted in this book, and she basically escapes from prison at the same time that Dala escapes from prison. And I did enjoy reading her escape sequence, and I was happy that she escaped. And I'm really curious to see where she goes and how they solve the problem. Because the only reason that they didn't just pardon her is because they're afraid of what the public will think, and so they basically said you're on your own, Tahiri, and you feel really bad for her. And she had just gotten a great lawyer, and her lawyer had finally started doing some great stuff. Buatu had done some great stuff. Then you have the other side of the book, which is Luke and Ben and the Lost Tribe of the Sith characters, Vistara Kai and others, and they go to Nam Choros, which I know Nam Choros has a big history in the Callista trilogy, particularly the Barbara Hamley books. I believe she's in. I believe this planet is particularly from Planet at Twilight. But we have, they go to Nam Choros, and there is one really cool exploration of a detail where they can't use the Force on the planet because it causes another reaction. Using the Force to force push something here might cause a deadly lightning storm on the other side of the planet. So using the Force can have other consequences. That idea I find fascinating because it is also explored in the High Republic series. In the High Republic Phase 2, there's this group called the Path of the Open Hand, and they believe that using the Force in one way creates an opposite reaction in another, and so they believe any use of the Force is evil, and they believe no matter what, even for good intentions, you shouldn't use the Force. So that exploration was a cool idea that's obviously been used elsewhere. But that whole sequence, which is basically the entire Luke and Ben plot in the book, was just boring to me. And that's my biggest problem this entire series. This been 7 books so far. My biggest problem is that every time the weakest part of the book is Luke and Ben's storyline with Vistara Kai. Vistara is an interesting character, and her dynamic with Ben is interesting, and Ben's dynamic with his father is interesting. So they have the ingredients. They have the ingredients to make a great story, but they keep sending them to weird planets for weird Force stuff to either chase down in the first 2 books, it's to figure out what happened with Darth Caedus. But then in books 3 and beyond, it's to try to stop Abeloth or try to stop the Lost Tribe of the Sith. All of this stuff should work. It just doesn't because it goes too weird, and it's just when you have it compared to the political storyline, which is much more engaging, which has more characters that we recognize and love, it's just frustrating. And at this point in the series, Luke and Ben and Vistara should be on Coruscant, or should be on a familiar Nam Choros is a familiar planet, but they should be somewhere that has more importance and the whole. I think this is part of the problem. The mandate was that this be a 9-book series, but this shouldn't have been a 9-book series. They should have dramatically cut this down to maybe 5 books, bring in 5 different authors, or maybe bring in 3, and maybe you have an author write books 1 and 5, an author write books 2 and 4, and an author write book 3. And so you make it a 5-book series, you condense it down, and you really just put the important bits in. I think that these sequences would be a lot more enjoyable if Ben and Luke were basically hopping to these planets for only a portion of a book, and the main plot was moving forward a lot more quickly, and same for the Coruscant plotline. If it was moving forward more quickly, I think that this series would work a lot better. Instead, it feels drawn out for drawn out's sake, and I feel similar in the Legacy of the Force series. My problem with the Legacy of the Force was it felt like 3 different authors had 3 different intentions of where they wanted the story to go. And so Aaron Allston was pulling it one way, Troy Denning was pulling it another, and then pulling it in a totally different direction was Karen Traviss. Those books, it was a 9-book story, but for the most part, it made sense why it had to be 9 books. I kind of get it. This series it did not need to be 9. I think the reason they did it as 9 is because they wanted each author to be able to have 3. And that makes sense, and also so that they could I don't know if they did it this way because I wasn't reading it when it came out, but I'm guessing they kind of pitched it as the first 3 are like part 1, second 3 are part 2, third 3 are part 3. Like I can imagine that they pitched it that way, but it didn't need to be, and that's and that I think that problem is a problem with the political plotline with Dala, but I think it is amplified with the Abeloth plotline with Luke and Ben chasing Abeloth. I think it is really amplified there. So, anyway, I know that was a rant. I just didn't. Each book had been enjoyable, and even to an extent, a little bit more enjoyable than the last. And they'd been upgrading. And I thought that, again, 4, 5, and 6, Backlash, I actually really enjoyed the Luke and Ben stuff. Allies, I really enjoyed the Luke and Ben stuff. Vortex, it wasn't my favorite, but I thought it was okay, well done here. So like they had been doing a really good job. So to see that storyline kind of revert to the first 3 books' enjoyment level was just frustrating, and I was like, oh, come on, are we seriously doing this? There are still 2 books remaining, and I believe that I know the next book is by Christy Golden, and I believe The Lost Tribe of the Sith takes center stage again, and I'm really excited to see how that dynamic works, because I loved their dynamic in Allies. I thought it was brilliant. I thought this, as I look back on it, I think this was my favorite book in the series so far, just because the whole Lost Tribe stuff was the best in this book. So I'm hoping that takes center stage there, and then I'm hoping that we're all on Coruscant for Apocalypse, which is Troy Denning's book, which is the final book. So there's 2 more books in this series. I'm enjoying it. There's still entertainment to it, but boy, I'm ready for it to be done, which is sad to say. It's sad to say. So if you've read, I give Conviction like a 7.5 out of 10. It's not the best book in the series. It's not the worst. It's kind of in the middle. Actually, no, it's not in the middle. It's towards the bottom, but it's not at the bottom. I think that Outcast, the first book, is the weakest. But if you've read Conviction, let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.